Hey, so welcome to McBike fly tying video. This is the first one we're doing. So it's dry fly season here in the Bulkley. So I'm going to be tying up just a nice little stonefly. I'm going to be tying it in brown, but you can also do it in black, tan, other colors. But yeah, so just start your thread off and just work down a nice layer of thread. All the way back to the point of the hook, so roughly there. And then we're going to be using some deer hair for tail. This is actually some local deer, nice patch I got from a friend. Not too much for the tail. Nice little clump, about that much. Now, when you go to stack your deer hair, you need to pull out the underfur, and I find one of the ways you can do it is you get a bit of a spin in your fingers, and because it's local, it seems to have a lot of underfur on it. It'll open everything up nice and wide and make it easier to pull out all that underfur. So, pull out all your underfur. If you don't do that, it really just doesn't stack worth a darn. We'll load that up into our stacker. Give it a few taps. I really like this stuff mostly because of its coloring. It's a little fine, but it's got some really nice color to the tips. So, length of the tail, I kind of just measure from the back of it. I want it hanging over the same as the back portion of the hook here. I want it over the back. So about there, just eyeball it. Little pinching loop. Kind of loose wraps, don't go tight. What I like to do actually is just come up loosely. We're going to go to a little less than the midpoint of the hook, and then come back, start to tighten it up. And what we're trying to avoid here is really wrapping it. You know, everybody talks about how they have a hard time spinning deer hair. It seems to me whenever I don't want to spin deer hair, it wants to spin. So do that, and then we can get progressively just a little bit tighter, keep it on top of the hook shank. Cut off your butt ends. And actually something else that'll kind of help speed this process up, which I didn't do this time, if you measure it out first, cut it to the length you want, and then trim your butt ends, it's actually easier than trying to go back in afterwards and do that. So we're also going to get some flotation from this deer hair. A little stiff piece on the tail. Prop it up in the water. Okay, next step, just a couple strands of copper crystal flash. Not too much, we don't want this to be some big crazy thing in the water. So we're going to take that, put it on the near side, a couple wraps to hold that in place, fold it over the side, and then back. Trim it to length just a little bit longer than the tail. Okay, next we're going to tie in our rib. So just to give a little more longevity to the fly, we're going to tie in a piece of copper wire for the rib. Just not cooperating with me. There we go. Copper wire for the rib. And we're also going to tie in a hackle at this point. So I don't have much around for brown hackles, but I did have this brown Indian rooster neck, so I'm going to use that. It's maybe a little long, but that's okay. This back hackle isn't that important really. Tie that in. and then bring your thread back to the back. Okay, next point. Now this is what makes this fly kind of a little unique in my opinion compared to a normal, like say a trout dry fly or something like that. We're going to use some, instead of using dubbing or something like that for the body, we're actually going to use a piece of foam. So this is 2 mil thin fly foam, and I'll show you, I've cut it down into just a really narrow strip, little taper on the tie-in point. So it's maybe, I don't know, 2-3 mil thick, the strip. Just attach that on the side, tie it in decent. Okay, and then we're just going to work that forward for our body. Basically, kind of like a touching turn, sort of gives a little bit of the appearance of segmentation perhaps, but not really. It's not really the main issue, just to give a little extra flotation, and it also serves one other purpose, which you'll see in a second here. Get that in, cut off your excess. Okay, so now I'm removing our, I don't usually use hackle pliers, but this is a particularly short hackle, so I'm going to, when we're hackling forward, we're going to actually try and place that right in between those wraps of the foam. So it's going to let our hackle kind of sit right in there and give it a little extra protection, which is kind of cool. And this hackle is really a little too long. Ideally what you're looking for is, you want something, you want your hackle to come just kind of about to the gap of the hook. Sit a little bit further down than that. Like I said, this body one isn't that important. It's fairly soft. It's more to give a bit of an impression of some legs, some life in the water. So now we're going to wrap our rib, and we're going to counter wrap it. So wrap it the opposite direction we did the hackle. Again, just provide some extra protection. Give it a little wiggle back and forth as you wrap, just so you're not trapping too many of those fibers. If you do find you trap a bunch of fibers, you can go back with your dubbing needle after and pick them out. Cross your thread, tie it down, and I have two things. I have an old pair of scissors that I use for cutting wire and stuff off the spool, but the other thing, of course, just hold your threads tight and wiggle it off instead of actually cutting it. Save your scissors. You don't want to be using your good scissors for cutting wire. Snip a few extra wayward fibers. So now we're going to put in the wing. So again, we'll go back to our deer hair. A little bit bigger clump this time. I want this to look a little more substantial. This is a big fly. So by the way, this particular one I'm tying on is this happens to be a Mustad hook. Yeah, it's a Mustad hook. Size 4 single salmon. There you can see that's what we're dealing with there. Alec Jackson, Daiichi Alec Jackson dry fly hooks, also just awesome. So you can tie these depending, I like to use this brown, can be a good sort of initial pass. One I like it a little bit larger size is a 4. You can tie them in 6s. Stack your hair up. Okay. Again, length, what I want to do is just a little bit shorter than the length of the tail. That's what I prefer anyways. Everybody has their own preference and sort of custom style. That's the beauty of tying your own flies, of course. You can do it whatever way you want. Bring this up. Again, I should have trimmed these first. Just a little bit shorter than the return eye is where we're going for. So I'm just going to clip this so you can see what the heck I'm doing. Okay, that looks pretty good. Cinch that down. Really important on the wing, obviously, that we're making sure we're not rolling around. I actually even like to apply a little bit of pressure this way with my fingers as I snug it up, because it does have a tendency to sort of flare and roll around otherwise. Okay, just trim up this mess I made. Like I said before, if you measure the length you need first, which half the time, at least, I never remember to do, you'll save yourself a lot of time and you'll have less of this mess to deal with after the fact. I mean, we're not making a muddler after all. Okay, so I'm going to tidy this up a little bit. Okay, so pretty good so far. The other thing I often like to do too is I'll pull up the wing. If I don't like the way it was sitting there, I'll actually pull up the wing, one wrap of thread in behind it, and then another one on top, just to kind of sit it up a little bit more and flatten it out with your finger if you like. It's looking pretty good now. Okay, so front hackle again. Ideally, if I had a nice brown dry fly hackle, that would be ideal. I don't. What I have is, though, rather than using that rooster neck, which is way too short and way too long, got a grizzly hackle. So I've taken a couple grizzly hackles there, and you'll notice one's a little longer. I'm actually going to save the tip off that longer one because I can use that again in a like an intruder fly, something like that. I often do that. If you use, these grizzly hackles are always so nice and long that I'll often use part of it for hackling a dry fly and then save the tip off of it, and you can use that tip on another fly for just kind of like a nice long bit of movement, and it'll save you a few bucks because there's no sense throwing away that tip. Alright, so back to our foam. And tie in our foam again, and that's what really this thing, you can skate this without a riffle hitch or anything like that. It's an awesome little fly. I was pretty impressed with the way it stands up, and I think a lot of that has to do with this foam. So we'll stop a little bit short of the eye so we can tie a nice little head there later. Tie off that foam. So we've got our two grizzly hackles. And you'll notice when you're doing for dry flies, normally you tie in tip first, or that's what I do anyways, and I fold it back, when you're doing a regular steelhead fly. Dry flies, you tie them in by the butt end of the fly. And I like to do them with the good side of the feather pointing towards the back. I find they stand up really nice that way. And so, nice, tight. Again, this should probably be a little bit longer. The fiber length, that is. It's not bad, but it should maybe be a little bit longer. Just drag that right out and get one more drop. Close. This is the thing when you're doing this stuff live, it's real realism. Gotta mess it up. Okay, cross your thread. As Davey would say, 90-degree turn the stem. And tie that off well before I cut that off. I'm always impressed when I see tyers who can just kind of snap off their hackle stems. I never even try it, they always get messed up. So again, that's what I was talking about there. There's that little tip That can be great in a little intruder fly. Smallish intruder. Just give a bit of movement to it. A couple fibers sticking forward here. Just going to snip those off. Tidy this up a little bit. Make a nice neat head. Good finish. Okay, all you need then is a little head cement, and you're good to go. So there it is, nice little brown stonefly